All right, let's talk about what happens when a massive construction project goes off the rails. There's a particular method used to figure out who's to blame for delays, called the Impacted As Planned Analysis, or IAP. Now, on the surface, it seems totally logical, really simple even. But as we're about to see, that simplicity, well, it's hiding a whole lot.
Okay, so picture this. A huge, multi-billion-dollar project is sinking. It's months behind schedule, and every single day is costing a fortune. When things go this sideways, trying to figure out what went wrong, and more importantly, whose fault it was, is an absolute nightmare.
So how do you even begin to untangle that kind of mess? Well, the construction industry has a bunch of forensic analysis techniques, kind of like CSI for building sites. Today, we're going to zero in on one of the most common and definitely one of the most controversial methods out there.
You know how it goes in these high-stakes situations. The contractor points a finger at the owner, blaming them for changing the design halfway through. The owner fires right back, saying the contractor's performance was just plain awful. Without some kind of objective tool, these arguments can just spin out of control into these endless, super expensive legal fights.
And this is where a method called Impacted As Planned, or IAP, makes its grand entrance. It's supposed to bring a simple, logical, almost mathematical approach to all this chaos.
So what is it really? At its heart, IAP is basically a hypothetical simulation. It asks this one very specific question. If this single delay happened, and this is a big but, everything else went perfectly according to plan, where would we end up? So right away, you can see it's a look at what could have happened, not necessarily what actually did.
The best way to think about it is like planning a road trip. IAP is like plugging a 30-minute lunch stop into your GPS before you even pull out of the driveway. It'll give you a new arrival time, sure, but it has no idea about the surprise traffic jam you're going to hit or that clever little shortcut your friend told you about. It's just a forecast, not a log of the actual trip.
Okay, so how does an analyst actually do one of these IAP analyses? You'd think it'd be complicated, but the process itself is, well, surprisingly straightforward.
It really just boils down to these 4 steps. You start with that perfect world schedule. You know, the one made at the very beginning of the project. Then you pick a delay you want to look at. You literally just plug it into that original schedule, and then you hit recalculate to see how much it pushes out the finish date. Simple as that.
So, here's our starting point. This is the original, untouched plan. See how every task flows perfectly one after the other? In this ideal scenario, the project finishes right on time. This is what we call the as-planned schedule.
And now we get to the core of the IAP method. We're going to take a single, hypothetical 3-day delay and drop it right into the plan. The computer recalculates everything, and boom, you can see the whole project's finish date just got shoved back by 3 days. It looks like clean, simple cause and effect.
But is that simplicity the whole story? I think you probably know the answer is no. This is where we need to get into the major strengths and, way more importantly, the critical weaknesses of this method.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. You can see here how the biggest strengths of the IAP method are also the direct cause of its most fatal flaws. I mean, it's easy to understand precisely because it ignores the messy reality of a job site. It's fast and cheap because it doesn't need any as-built data, the actual daily logs or site photos. But that means the result is purely theoretical. It's a simulation that might have zero connection to what really went down.
This quote from an industry expert just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures the fundamental problem with IAP. It operates in this weird vacuum, pretending that the project was a static thing and that only the specific delays the analyst chose to include had any effect at all. And we all know that's almost never how the real world works.
And that subjectivity, that's where it gets dangerous. It opens the door for manipulation. An analyst can just decide to include only the delays caused by the other side, and suddenly they've built this perfect narrative to support their client. It can become a textbook case of the tail wagging the dog, where you decide on the conclusion you want first and then build the analysis backward to justify it.
So with all these really serious criticisms, you have to be asking yourself, why on earth is the impacted as-planned method still used so much in legal disputes?
Well, the answer really just comes down to practicality. It is often the fastest and cheapest way to try and make a point. And honestly, in situations where the record keeping was terrible, it might be the only tool you have to even start an analysis. That's why it often gets used as a starting point in a big dispute.
So, if there is one thing to take away from all of this, it's this. IAP tells a story. It's a story about what might have happened if the world was perfect, except for a few hand-picked problems. It's one perspective, it's one piece of the puzzle, but it is absolutely never the complete, factual history of what happened on that project.
And that really leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, right? When you're trying to solve these incredibly complex problems, what's the real price you pay for simplicity? That's all for today. Thanks for joining us.